Welcome to the training webinar for this week. After our 1 week hiatus, we are now back and ready to talk about Process Director again. This week, we are going to talk about managing processes. Not only how processes are managed on a day-to-day basis and how you can go in and manipulate processes, but we're also going to look at processes in error. And we're going to take a brief look, even though I have talked about them in a couple of other contexts, we're going to talk about processes and sub-processes. Just to give ourselves a little refresher, we'll do that at the end. For now, let's talk about managing processes as a general practice in Process Director. Anytime someone submits a form and it invokes the process, there are basically two types of processes. By the way, before I go any further, let me let you know that there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window. So if you have any questions, please hit that Q&A button as we go through this. I think for some of you, you're probably fairly practiced at this, so you might not have a lot of questions. For others, you may, and if you do, hit the Q&A button. So whenever a process is invoked, it is generally in one of two states. It is either in an active state or in a completed state. If you look over here on the left side of the screen, in the content list, I'm looking in this single process folder. And here is my actual process that we're using as a sample today. And below that, there are two nodes, the active timelines and the completed timelines. We are currently looking at the active timelines because I have 6 different timelines running. There are no completed timelines because everything is in process. So for our purposes for this particular process, all we really care about currently are our running active processes. In this view of the content list, when we're looking at these active timelines or completed timelines, if I click on the timeline, it will directly open the timeline properties. Now, I can, of course, click over here and click the properties button. That's really unnecessary, even though it's available to you. All you have to do is click the properties. There are several different tabs for the properties for a timeline instance. The way that timeline instances are created and the way that they run are important to know. So for example, I have 3 timeline activities in this timeline. Now, in this particular one, as you look at it, you can see that I was the initiator. I completed activity 1, completed activity 2, and now I'm assigned to activity 3. I can tell that this is the running activity because it has a green background, which lets me know that it's the active activity. So there are 3 activities in this process timeline. But if we go back to active timelines and I grab this one, say, where notice as we look at our content list, contents pane on the right side of the screen, it gives me some information here. One of the bits of information at the very last column is the timeline activity. That's the activity that's currently running in this timeline instance. Now, as you can see here, this is running activity 1. Let's take a look at it. Note that it shows that the timeline was initiated. I initiated it when I submitted the form. And now I'm in activity 1. Activity 2 and activity 3 exist in the timeline definition, but they don't yet exist in this instance. So it's important to understand how timeline activities relate to the process timeline. Whatever the current state of the process timeline is at any given moment is going to be reflected in the timeline instance. So for now, I have 3 activities in this process timeline. We're going to break that in a minute, but for now I have 3 activities. But if I look at this instance, it only shows me 1 activity. As far as this instance is concerned, activity 2 and activity 3 don't exist. They will not exist in this instance until I complete activity 1. We have this idea, I think, a lot of time that what happens is the instance is created and it just automatically knows everything, all of the information and all of the configuration that is in the process timeline definition is automatically included in the process timeline instance. That is not true. Obviously, our top level information is all included. So, all of the top level properties of the timeline are included, but the activities are not. The activities don't actually exist until they are invoked. So I have not invoked activity 2 yet. So for the purposes of this timeline instance, right now at this moment, activity 2 does not exist. And it will not exist until I complete activity 1. I want you to put a bookmark on that because we're going to return to that a little bit later because I'm going to be deleting activity 2. And I have all of these running activities, 2 of which are currently running in activity 2. And so what is going to happen when I delete activity 2? And depending on what version of Process Director you're in, if you're in an older version, you might see a different behavior than what we're going to see today. I'll talk about that at the appropriate time. But what you need to know is that the activities that are created in an instant are just-in-time creation. So there's no reason to include them in the instance. They have not occurred. So for all practical intents and purposes, this activity instance does not know that activity 2 and activity 3 exist. When I complete this activity, activity 1, the instance is going to go back and check with the process timeline definition and figure out what it's supposed to do next. And then currently it will invoke activity 2 because that's the next scheduled activity. And that's the one that will run. And then it will be added at the appropriate time to this instance. Now, of course, that assumes that activity 2 still exists. And like I said, we're going to delete activity 2, and then we're going to see what happens when we do that. So for right now, I have this activity and it is running. It's running fine. Let's go back to our timeline that is currently running in activity 3, or at least one of them. So we'll open this one. Now we can see that we're still running in activity 3. This routing slip is the only thing on the very first tab of the timeline activity instance, or I'm sorry, the timeline instance on the timeline status tab. There are a couple of things that we can do on this tab. Obviously, we can see the overall stats on this process timeline. It's active when it started. Obviously, it hasn't ended, so there's no value for timeline ended yet, clearly. And there will be once I complete activity 3 and the timeline automatically terminates. All I really have on this page to look at is the routing slip, which kind of tells me what my status is in a quick snapshot for this process timeline instance. I can change some of the options on the routing slip, and you might want to do this, especially if you're running processes and sub-processes, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. I do have some things that are missing from my process timeline. Well, see, I can show, my avatar. I can show any pending users, parents, most recent instances only. I can show it in reverse order, so I can have the most recent stuff happening at the top, and I can show all related processes. So if there are any associated processes, those will show as well. So I have a lot of options on the routing slip for how I want to see it, but in general, the default view gives us most of the information that we need, and it's acceptable for most cases. Most cases, not all. We'll discuss that in a little bit. So that's really all I can do here. This is not really the most important tab, and in fact, it doesn't give you some vital information that you need to know, which we'll talk about when we talk about processes and error. To actually see what is going on with this timeline in detail, we need to switch over to the administration/timeline tab of the process instance. Now, this shows me all of the activities that are running currently in the process timeline. When they occurred, the green line is today, where we are right this moment. So I can, look at my individual activities. Each activity has its own activity bar, and we'll talk about that pop-up in a minute. And you can see that, like activity 3, it extends to the green bar, which is now. So we can see that this activity is still running. There's a couple little icons that appear beside each activity name. If you see the little green check mark, it means that that activity has been completed. If you see the arrow, that tells you that that is a currently running activity. In this particular case, because it's a very simple timeline, there's only one activity that's going to be running at any given time. In a more complex timeline, I might see many different activities, all of which are running simultaneously. Obviously, it depends on how your timeline is configured as to whether you'll see that or not. As I said, for each activity, if you roll over the bar, you can see an informational tooltip that pops up to look at the information about that specific activity. So you get to see its status, when it started, when it ended, the result of the activity, if any. I don't think none of these activities have any results, so you won't see any result listed on the very top line there of activity 1. And then at the bottom, you get to see a routing slip of that activity, and that just shows you all of the participants in that particular activity. I should note that we did discover a bug. It's rare, and it is highly dependent on the configuration of the activity, but it is possible. If you have a lot of participants in an activity and your screen size is small enough, and I don't have multiple participants, so I can't really replicate it here, but this tooltip box can get, relatively large. If I have, 15 people assigned to this activity, then this tooltip box is going to get super big. And in fact, it might get so big that it's going to change its position on the screen. And there are certain cases, as far as the automatic display of this is kind of controlled by your browser, but kind of not, because we do have some CSS styling control over it. But if you have a really big, and by big, I mean vertically long tooltip, what can happen is it's going to want to show you the bottom of the tooltip screen. And it may be, depending on your screen size, that what's going to happen is that all this information at the very top, above the routing slip, activity 1, activity status, start, ended, that might get hidden. It might extend past the top of the pane in which the Gantt chart appears, which means it'll be unreadable. Like I said, I can't really do that because I didn't think about it when I was creating all of this stuff, that my tooltip box can be so big that the top portion of it, which is where all of the important information is, by the way, it might extend past the top of the screen and you won't be able to see it. And the reason that is important, we'll talk about a little bit later, especially if you have an activity in error, because the error message appears in the very top of the dialog box, right? Not dialog box, but tooltip. And at the top of the tooltip, if your tooltip is so long vertically that the top of the tooltip extends to the top of the screen, you won't be able to see what the error is. And if you don't see what the error is, that makes it kind of hard to fix. Now, like I said, because of the size of this tooltip, it can extend past the top of the screen, especially on smaller screens. And if it hides the error message, I need to be able to see that error message. Well, you would think that what I could do, as you can with any activity, is right-click on the activity. And I can go to the properties window for that particular activity. And that will open up in its own little tab here called Timeline Instance Activity Properties. A minute ago, we were looking at administration timeline. We hit properties, and it took us to this new tab, which it just created for the timeline instance activity. Unfortunately, we do not currently show, if this activity is an error, we don't currently show the error message at the top of the page. So if you're in a situation where you've got this huge tooltip box because you've got 30 people assigned to an activity, you can't read the error message at the top of the tooltip because it's off the top of the screen. Okay, so you think I'll go to the properties here and I'll see what the error is. No. You will not see what the error is because we don't show the error message here. So we have changed that. We got a ticket this week where this in fact happened to someone, and sure, I was able to sort of fix it by just making my screen a lot smaller. You know, on your browser, you can zoom in and zoom out of a screen, and you can just make everything much smaller. So I eventually could make the screen so small that the error message displayed. It was too small to read, but at least I got it displayed. And so we thought, well, okay, fine. If an activity is an error, we need to actually show it on the Instance Activity Properties tab as well. So even in a case where you have a huge tooltip and it can't all be displayed on the screen, you will be able to open up the Instance Activity Properties and you will be able to see any error for that activity. We'll come back here in a minute. For now, let's go back here and let's talk about what happens whenever you right-click on a timeline activity. In this instance, you've got three options: properties, which we'll go back and look at in a sec, cancel this activity, and restart this activity. Restart this activity is really important if you have an activity in error. When an activity is in, well, you know what? Let's talk about that in activity and error. Again, another thing to put a pin in that we'll talk about for an activity and error. However, restarting an activity is often important, especially if you have changed the participants in an activity. So you have an activity assigned to some people. They've now left the organization. I've got to reassign that activity to other people. And I got a couple of ways I can do this. One of the ways that we do this, of course, is to go into the process timeline definition and change the assignees for the user task, which is fine. But remember, tasks don't exist until the activity is invoked. And in the instance, activities don't exist until they occur. At the very start of a process timeline activity, when it first gets invoked, that is when the process instance goes back, checks with the timeline definition, and sees, okay, who's supposed to be assigned to this thing? How long is it supposed to run? Am I even supposed to run it? Is there a needed when condition that has to be fulfilled, or should I skip this activity entirely? If I do have to run it, how long does it have to run? What notifications do I have to send out, if any? And it goes through all of those properties to construct the activity instance. And that activity instance is only constructed on activity start. Now, a restart is an activity start. So if I have an activity that was assigned to a set of individuals, they've departed, I now need to reassign that to a different individual or individuals. I can do that one of two ways. One way is to go into the process timeline definition, and I can change the activity participants there and save my process timeline definition. Then I can go into the activity instance and just click restart this activity. So that is one scenario in which I might want to restart an activity without editing the activity properties itself. The other way is to edit the activity properties, which we'll look at in a second. I have the ability to cancel an activity if I no longer want it to run. Now, if you cancel the activity, that counts as a type of activity completion. So it doesn't cancel the entire timeline. It only completes this activity with the result of admin canceled. And so whatever is supposed to happen when this activity is complete will happen. So let's say I was in activity 2 and I canceled activity 2, which I can't because this activity is complete. I have other options for that. But if I canceled activity 2, it would just automatically, once activity 2 was canceled, it would automatically move to activity 3. So the timeline would continue to operate. All I've really done by canceling the activity is just set that activity's result as admin canceled, and we move on through our process timeline. No harm, no foul. Now, as you saw just a second ago, I get slightly different options if the activity is completed. I can roll back to this activity or I can restart this activity. Two wildly different things are going to happen depending on which of these two options, restart or rollback, that I choose. If I choose restart this activity, what's going to happen is that activity 2 is going to restart. Great. Let's restart this activity and give it a second. Okay, great. The activity has been restarted. Ha. Activity 3, however, is not finished. It's still running. Now I have activity 2 and activity 3 running. And if I complete activity 2, it is going to restart activity 3. So there will be two instances of both activity 2 and activity 3 ultimately in this particular process timeline. And now, of course, I'm back to cancel or restart this activity. So if I go ahead and cancel this activity, and we'll have to wait a second for it to reset. Okay, that activity has been canceled. It has been done. You can see the status there of that activity. For activity 2 at the bottom on the fourth column there, it says admin canceled. So we're good to go. Now, let's roll back to this activity. Roll. Come on. There we go. Activity 3 is now admin canceled. Now, instead of just restarting activity 2, and you can restart any activity anytime you want, just remember, restart only starts that activity. By rolling back now, I have essentially said, okay, whatever happened in activity 2 was awful, horrible. We have to go back and do it again. Oh, and by the way, we want to cancel activity 3. We don't want to do that. We want to roll back to activity 2, and we're just going to get do-overs for activity 2 and activity 3. So the restart just does exactly what it says. It just restarts the activity. It has no effect on any of the rest of the process timeline. Rollback will actually, wherever we are in the process timeline, it's going to cancel everything, and it is going to take us back to, in this case, activity 2, as if none of this stuff ever happened. Now, obviously, it did happen. Activity 3 was created. It was invoked. We have to track what happened to that activity. We're not just going to make it disappear. So while we are going to pretend like it never happened, it did happen, and we are going to log that it happened. So if I go back again, and I can now cancel activity 2, activity 2 will cancel. Our screen will take a few seconds to refresh while the system figures out what in the world is going on, and then it will drop us back into activity 3. And as you can see, activity 3 is now the active activity, and it is the second time that we have run activity 3. So you have these options in the process timeline to roll back or restart de novo from another point in the process timeline, wherever you would like. You can always restart an activity. In all cases, you have the ability to go into properties. Now, the property is going to be a little bit different for a running activity by a completed activity. So that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do that. Let's talk about the timeline instance activity properties. Again, we have the same options at the top of this tab as we do on the timeline status tab, except in this case, we're just looking at the instance itself. So at the very top, we get all of the instance generic information that we're used to. We also get our routing slip options. Obviously, for an activity, I have different routing slip options than I would have for a normal process timeline activity. I can, however, change what I'm seeing. Notice I unchecked show canceled users. And when I did, it's only showing me the currently running activity. So again, we're pretending by unchecking that checkbox that the original run of activity 3 just never happened. Well, the less said about it, the better. We just won't talk about it, but it's still there. And if I, recheck that, it still appears in my routing slip, and I have the same sort of options here about what to show. I can show the most recent instances only, which now is again removing the canceled user, but it's only removing the canceled user, not because it was canceled, but because it was a previous iteration of the activity. So let's say I had not canceled activity 3 previously. Let's just say we went through a loop, and let's say we went through that loop, I don't know, 3-4 times because we kept asking for resubmittals. Well, I might not want to see all of those past iterations. I mean, I might, but I might not want to see all those past iterations. So I can just check that, and it will show me only the most recent iteration of this particular activity. So that's useful for an activity that's in a loop and you just want to get rid of the garbage and just look at whatever the currently running activity is. What's the other one that's usually turned off? Show assigned on. The show assigned on is generally not necessary because the general way a process timeline works is that we already know who the participants are, right? They're configured in the process timeline definition. And whenever the activity is invoked, it just immediately assigns the users. So in most cases, the assigned on date, which we're now seeing here, is going to be the same as the timeline started date that we see up here, because the users are going to be assigned immediately whenever the timeline instance, the activity instance is invoked. That's not always true, because you can go in here as an admin and you can do a little monkey business, because up here at the very top, I have these action links, right? So let's take Diana for an example. Let's just pick Diana Stewart. So there we go. I've picked Diana Stewart. And now, so I've got the basic actions. I can cancel the activity. I can restart it. I can cancel the entire timeline. If I have a task in this activity, I can open it directly from here, which I do. So I guess I could open it directly from here, which in my case is just going to open the form in task context to show it to me. And of course, I can add myself, or I can add Diana to this activity. If I click on the activity itself, notice that we have these little checkboxes here. Their function is not immediately evident until we click on me, the user, down here in the process, the activity instance. Okay, well now I can do a couple of things. I can cancel that user in this task. Be careful about the order in which you do this. If I'm going to replace a user, I am going to want to use reassign user. I've put Diana Stewart up here. So whatever user changes I'm going to make, I want Diana Stewart here. So I can, if I'm going to remove this user or complete that user's task, or remove or cancel. That's what I was thinking of. Cancel user. I'm probably going to need somebody in there to replace me because I'm the only user assigned. So what I might do in this particular case is I would just say, okay, well, fine, I have Diana Stewart. I'm going to add Diana as a user. Okay, so now I have two users there for activity 3. And then I'll just pick on Dale Franks and I will remove the user or cancel the user. Either one, I get the warning dialog box at the top of the screen. Either one is going to be fine. Now I'm admin canceled. And of course, if I need to just add myself again, I can certainly do that. I can just add that user. And if I decide that I still want to be the real user and Diana is not somebody I want here, I can remove that user. Let's be super careful with removing that user, because we did remove that user. Removing that user is one of those rare instances where, very rare instances, in fact, when you're telling Process Director, let's pretend this never happened. Whatever that user did, and by the way, this works for completed activities as well as for currently running activities. If you hit remove user, what you are saying is, I don't want that user appearing at all. Any results they had, I want erased. Whatever actions they did, however long they took to do things, I want it all gone. It's like, was it? I can't. Robert De Niro in one of the uh, gangster movies. It's like, I want them dead. I want their families dead. That's exactly what we're doing here. We are killing this entire user. So we are deleting all of the history. This is rarely done. You have the power to do it. Use this power responsibly, because now we are just eliminating, in terms of this timeline activity instance, we're eliminating all records of that user. Now, look, it is often a useful thing to be able to do, right? So we have a customer who has a very, very, very large and complex application that we created for them, and it kind of models one of their central business processes. And there are times when they're going through an approval and someone says, I want to approve this with major changes. That's not what they meant to hit. What they wanted was minor changes, or they wanted to approve it, or they wanted to send it back for, or just reject it and say, yeah, we're not going to do this. Okay, they've hit the wrong button. So let's say they hit approve with major changes. Okay, in that particular context, in that particular timeline, it's going to go right back to the beginning and it's going to start everything all over again. This long, tortuous, often months-long process of review and revision because they accidentally hit major revision. So we often get some request that says, look, you got to remove that result because that result throws everything all whack-a-doodle. So what we need to do is we need to restart that activity and we need to remove that user. And when you remove that user and restart the activity, their old result goes away, vanishes into the ether, and now they're reassigned the new task when you restart it. And this time, hopefully, they'll click the right button on the bottom of the form and they won't try to restart the entire process. So there is a great use case for being able to remove a user completely from the timeline activity, but be careful about how you exercise that. So just know that when I'm on the activity instance properties, and I did not mean to pick myself, again, I want to pick Diana or Barb. So we'll go with Diana again. And then I select a user down here. I can now have full control over what happens to the user that I've selected. And of course, if it's a new user, I can simply add that user to the task. And once I add that user to the task, I can then go in and do all of these other things, including restarting them in the task. Now, sometimes restarting them in the task is better than getting rid of their old user one. But I think if you hit restart user, unable to restart, ensure the user is not already running. So look, there we are. I've already done something wrong. Since I'm already running there, I would need to add Diana Stewart and she would have to be running. Okay. It gets, again, I'm going back to, I've picked the wrong result. I want to recalibrate that. If a user is completed in the activity, I probably can't do it here either because I am still Dale Franks. So yeah, it's not going to do that. I'm still the assignee. So that restart isn't going to work either, but I do have the ability to restart the user in the task. Now, the trouble with restart the user, if they've completed their task, is it doesn't get rid of their previous selection. So if that still is in there as a result, depending on how your timeline is canceled, it could still cause problems. So you might still have to go in and remove the user to get rid of that old result after you restart them in the task. So there's no hard and fast rules about when you restart a user and when you re-add the user and remove them. It just depends on what you're trying to do. Just know that if you restart the user, it's not going to erase their original activity. That's confusing. It will not erase the actions that they took in the original run of that activity. They'll still show up in the routing list. That might be okay, but it might not. And if it is not, then you can take that old activity where, like in this case, it was rolled back, and you can simply remove that user. Now, I am afraid to hit remove user because I'm the user, and I think since I'm both the active and the old user, I'm afraid it'll remove me again, which we've already seen it happen, but that's fine. I would want to go back and remove this user. I think, it does. Okay, fine. We took a gamble there because I wasn't entirely sure what was going to happen, because usually you're not the user who's the assigned user in the activity, right? You're administering it. You're not doing all this stuff. And so it doesn't really matter. So in this case, I hit remove user, and now it takes that rollback user and just removes it completely from this activity. And so now we only have this current user, which is me, who is the administratively assigned user. And you can see whenever you do these administrative tasks, Process Director is going to record that it was you who did it. So the assignee is Dale Franks, and it was administered by Dale Franks. So you can see that I am kind of monkeying around with my own activities. Once I have done whatever I want to do with my timeline instance activity or timeline activity instance, then I can go back to my regular administration/timeline tab and see all the stuff that I need to see there. The next tab we need to talk about is the References tab. Now, this is the tab that will show you all of the timeline attachments that are included here. Now, in our case, we only have one. We only have the form because I did not add any documents. This is why I always say, make all of your document attachments process references, not form references. Because if I did have document attachments, I'd see them here. I would be able to see them all listed inside the process timeline instance, and I would have access to both the form and all of the document attachments that I've attached. So by attaching it to the process, this gives me one place that I can go to see all of the attachments, including the form. If you attach to the form, well, that becomes a little more difficult because if I want to see the attachments, now I got to go into the form and then I got to go in the form instance and I got to find the right form instance, which I think is this one. And then I've got to click it and go to properties because if I just click on the form here, and this is how forms and process timelines or form instances and timeline instances differ when we're looking at them in the content list. If I have a form listed, Process Director is going to want to show me the form. And if I want to see the properties of the form, then I have to go into properties. I have to select the form first, then go into properties, and then I have to go into attachments and find the attachments for the form. So it just makes administering a given process timeline, especially one that has attachments, way more tedious if I have to go through the form to find all my attachments. Sure, there are some things that are easier to do just in terms of, quick configuration if you attach things to the form, but from a management perspective, as the process manager, it makes your life a little more difficult, especially if you're dealing with a lot of attachments, to have to go to the form instance if I want to see the attachments and the timeline instance if I want to see other stuff. It's best just to throw everything into the timeline instance, pop open that timeline instance, and you can see everything that's happened, and you can see all of the timeline items. Let me tell you something that I hate, and that is when I click on the timeline items, and let me close this. See, this is irksome. See, I go to active timelines, and it shows me all my active timelines. I open up the instance. I say, great, let me look at the attachments. And then it shows me a knowledge view. It shows me a content list knowledge view. And where did all my tabs go? They're gone. Now that I've shown myself this, I now have to go back and re-navigate back to active timelines and then find, and if, fortunately, I know which one I'm looking at. It's the very first one. And I've only got 6. Not a big deal. If I had 1,000 of these things, this would start to get super irksome because I'd have to go here. I'd have to find the timeline that has the proper name, has like the proper request number or whatever. I don't even have that configured for these timelines. And then I have to find the timeline. Then I have to click it. And well, that's not what I want to do. Active timelines. Click it. There we go. Now it takes me back to my property screen. So clicking on the timeline items tab is worse than being stabbed, granted, but that's how the system works. I don't know why we do it that way, but we've always done it that way. It's really irksome. And it didn't used to be that bad because if you were in the old UI in version 5, when you opened up a timeline instance, the timeline instance actually got its own node over on the left-hand side in the content list. Excuse me, I'm going to need to take a drink. All right, sorry about that. Throat was getting dry. But in the new content list, you don't get a direct link to the instance anymore. So it's now an extra burden. I think the more I talk about it, the more I'm wondering myself why I have not submitted a JIRA ticket to the engineering team to make the timeline items tab less horrifically painful in 6.1. But don't worry, I'm going to handle that after this. In any event, the next tab, well, it keeps wanting to take me. That's the other thing. It wants to remember what the last tab you were looking at was. And so if you click on it and it reopens it on the timeline items tab, that's spectacularly unhelpful. All right, the related process tab shows you all of the processes that are related to this process, including, weirdly, itself. So this process is related to itself, and it will show up on the related process tab. Now, this doesn't make much sense here in this context, but if we go back here and let's pick an active timeline. There are no active timelines. Of course not, because I apparently deleted them. Okay, let's see if there are any active timeline in here. I was playing with all this yesterday, and I may have gone back in and cleaned everything up, and it looks like I did clean everything up. So let's do something real quick here. Let's go to this asynchronous sub-process folder. Let me run it. I don't even need to put text in there. I don't even know why I put a text box on this form. It was dumb. Um, that's activity one. We want to complete that activity. And now I'm running main 3, which means my sub process is running. So now I have an active timeline running. Great. So we can now open this timeline. And again, Process Director is going to want to reopen the last tab that was open. So in this case, on the previous timeline, it had opened up the related processes tab. So that tab automatically just opened up here when I looked at this instance. So that's a thing that happens, just so that you know. But again, I see my current process, which is this one. It's bold-faced, by the way, so that you know that we're talking about this one itself. But here's my sub-process. So that is a related process. I invoked the sub-process via the launch process, or no, the run process custom task. Launch process was the previous version of run process. We deprecated it because it wasn't as good as run process. So this is the process, sub-process, is the process that was invoked by my CT. And as you can see, it is a related process to my main process. I have two processes, process and sub-process. And as you can see, they're both related. So I can see my related processes from that particular tab. The next tab is the Object Links tab. Now, I don't really have any object links. I don't even think I have any sysvar links. I do not. So I don't have any object links to this particular process timeline. I think on the reverse side, if I go to the object links on the form, I do have the link to the timeline definition, because the timeline definition gets invoked by the form. So that's a real link. But in the process itself, if I go to the object links tab, and I have to be in the process itself, it doesn't have a backlink to the form. So basically, these are all forward links. So any object to which this forwards to would be an object links. I wonder, I've never thought about this before. So let's go to my process. Now, this is a synchronous process. So it actually runs a process activity. And I wonder if I go into this timeline, which is not running. So let's invoke this again. Here's the object links for the form. I'll deal with this real quick just to see if it works. So let's run the form. Okay. It's got literally one text box. And we're still going to have to wait 15 seconds for this form to compile, because we're now going to pretend like it's a brand new form and it's a new day and this form has never run before. Which I guess is kind of true, since I deleted, I think, all the form instances. But okay, painful. By the way, 2 weeks ago, when we did the business values performance, this is why we never timed the first time we opened a form, because we're having to go through this compile process. And this is not on the most, this installation of Process Director is not on the most powerful VM we have. Let's put it that way. So the compile process takes an unacceptably long time for me on my little tiny instance. But there we go. Finally, we have our activity. We're going to submit this form. That's going to put us in main activity one. We're going to hit complete. Main activity one is going to go away because we are now inside a sub process. We don't care about that at this moment, other than to go back and look at our process, open our instance, and okay, so invoking the process activity type does not constitute creating an object link out to the sub process. I was not sure what was going to happen here because I've never actually looked at it before. And I think we can say that that does not count as a forward link. So most often you'll see the forward link in forms and their, how they're linked. So back to single process, back to active timelines, and let's take this same timeline instance that we have continuously tortured. I have metadata. Look, there's metadata is an entirely, it's a webinar all of its own, as you know, but I can individually assign metadata to a timeline instance. Usually you wouldn't do this. Usually it inherits whatever metadata, if you're using metadata, that you have assigned in the process timeline definition. So when it creates the timeline instance, it just inherits that metadata. But as a process manager, you do have the ability to go into each individual instance and make and create unique metadata for that instance. I was about to say, I don't know why you would do that. I think it's more fair to say that the cases where you would need to do this are very rare, and they're almost invariably extremely important that the metadata is correct, because we do have customers that have quite complex metadata setups, and they have many knowledge views that require the proper metadata be assigned for a particular instance to show up in a knowledge view. Now, generally, this is far more important for forms and form instances than it would be for timelines and timeline instances. However, it is occasionally useful to be able to do this for the timeline, and almost invariably, if the metadata is messed up on a timeline instance and you're tracking metadata at the timeline instance level, it's probably because you've got a complex and important metadata setup. Something has gone wonky somewhere. Somebody picked the wrong metadata, because that's also possible, where you have a metadata category picker and an attribute picker. Someone puts in the wrong value and that messes up your whole system. You have to go in and kind of manually fix that by going into both in most cases, you would have to go into both the form and the process timeline instances, find that metadata and correct it. So while you usually can just sort of rely on the system to do everything, if you're allowing users to select metadata here and there, screw ups can occur, and so you have to go in and fix that metadata, and you have to do it both in the form and the process timeline. Finally, the permissions tab. Every object in Process Director has a permissions tab. A couple of weeks ago, we went through the whole rigmarole of how permissions work, so I'll not replicate that here, but you can go in and change the permissions as necessary for an instance. Again, generally not necessary. Generally, you're going to have your permissions set. You have a permissions methodology. You've assigned permissions at the folder level, and you're going to depend on inheritance to reliably set all of your permissions as they should be set. As you can see on this system, since I'm the only one who uses it, I'm not all that big on permissions methodology on this particular system, because all authenticated users can do anything on this system. And I'm pretty much the only authenticated user on this system, other than my sample users who are also key. So I have loose permissions, but if you need to go into the individual instance, change permissions, you can change permissions. Okay, so that is just managing a timeline instance and the individual activity instances. So let's talk about now when things might go wrong. And before we get into errors, let's talk about instances where you break our single process timeline. I've got three activities: activity 1, activity 2, and activity 3. They're all dependent on each other. There's no loop. This is a super simple process timeline activity. Obviously, most of yours are going to be more complex than that. If we look at our active timelines, I have 2 timeline instances that are running activity 3, 2 that are running activity 2, and 2 that are running activity 1. So I have 6 instances, 2 of each are running in each individual activity. So far, so good. What is going to happen when I need to change my process timeline? So let's say I don't care about activity 2 anymore. Activity 2 is unnecessary. In fact, let's do 2 things. Let's create a new activity. We'll call it activity 4. However, activity 4 is now going to be dependent on activity 1. And I am, in fact, going to move activity 4 up here. This is a new activity. New people are doing new things, and I no longer want activity 2. And activity 3 has its own problem. I need to make activity 3 dependent on the new activity, activity 4. So we're going to go ahead and close that. And now I want to get rid of activity 2. Let me explain to you the conundrum from the point of view of BP-Logix and how Process Director works. We have a couple of different options on how we're going to handle this internally and how it's going to affect you as a process manager. In earlier versions of the product, and by earlier, I mean not that long ago, certainly version 3 worked a little differently, version 4 worked differently again, and version 5 works differently again. The reason is because once I go in and begin doing this, so I'm going now from activity 1, 2, and 3 to activity 1, 4, and 3, and I'm getting rid of activity 2. Now, in one sense, I'm going to be fine in many cases because everything that is running in activity 1 doesn't care about activity 2 or activity 4. Remember, as I said earlier, these activities don't exist in the timeline instance yet because they haven't been invoked. So it doesn't care. Does activity 3 care if activity 2 is gone? No, not really, because activity 3 is past that. Activity 2 happened. We recorded the happeningness of activity 2. So we're past that. We don't care what happens to activity 2 anymore. We've recorded it. All we really care about is what happens to those people, and there are 2 of them that are currently running in activity 2. And how are we going to make Process Director work whenever I hit the remove activity link up here to kill this activity? Actually, that's not the activity I want to get rid of. Activity 2 is the activity I want to get rid of. So what's going to happen when I click the link? From our point of view, from sort of the BP-Logix corporate point of view, we basically have 2 paths that we can run down. And no matter which path we choose, it's going to inconvenience you. And the reason why we have changed this behavior a couple of different times is because at various times, various customers, and we have asked, we've taken the replies and tried to figure out what the consensus was about how they want process timeline instances that are in flight to work whenever I start deleting activities that have running instances. Again, two choices. One, I'm just going to throw all of your running activities into an error state. You're the process manager. You're going to have to open up all of those timeline instances, and you're going to have to go in and either cancel those activities while you can't restart them. They don't exist anymore because I've made a change to the process timeline. That change in the definition happens instantly. It is now going to be reflected in all future timeline instances that get started. Forms work the same way. I'm going to go in, I'm going to remove a field from a form, I'm going to add a new field to a form. Every single form instance that gets created from that point on is going to reflect how that form template is configured. It may be completely different than it looked 5 seconds ago, but the changes that you make take effect instantly on the instances when they get invoked. But remember, timelines work a little different because once you create the form, that's the form. That's how it exists. And if I go in and mess with the form, then all of my form instances are just automatically going to change. And if I reopen an old form from 3 years ago, it's going to have all my current changes on that old form as well, and all the old fields are going to be gone or whatever. That's a problem, but it's not a major problem. It's an easily fixable problem. Now with process timelines, remember they work different because activities don't exist in the timeline instance until they're invoked, and then they just get added. So depending on, and you can have multiple branches in a process timeline where, for some runs of that timeline instance, certain activities will occur and entirely different activities will occur in another one. And I'm only going to see, when I look at the timeline instance, the activities that actually occurred. All the rest of them don't exist. But now I've got two activities that do exist. So one choice is just to throw both of those activities into an error state. You have to open up the timeline activity instance, and you got to figure out what you want to do with that activity. Do you want to cancel it? Do you want to go back and restart activity one? We don't know what you want to do. So our initial thing was, you're going to have to figure it out. It's going to go into an error state, and you're the one that made the change to the timeline. We don't know what it is you're trying to do in your timeline. So we're just going to throw everything that's running activity 2 when you delete it. We're just going to throw everything into an error state, and it's up to you to figure out what you want to do with it. You deleted it. Now you have to pay for that by reconfiguring all of your activities that were running. And that was fine until somebody deleted an activity that was running in 120 process instances, and they were not ultimately keen on opening 120 process instances one at a time and configuring each process instance, because they estimated that was, based on how their timeline worked, that was probably going to be an entire day's work for one person just to go through 120 instances. And if it was only one day, they were lucky. All right, well, that's not going to work. So what do we do now? So we went through a couple of interim changes. It's not important to talk about them. Those are in prior versions, but this is where we are right now. So if I'm going to say, fine, I'm going to remove activity 2. It's gone. It looks gone. Everything looks fine. Well, let's just save this. And, oh, okay, well, timeline has been saved, but wait a second. Activity 2 was deleted, but there are activities still running. Those need to be canceled or completed to delete this activity. What does that mean? Let's open it up. Oh, well, activity 2 actually is still here. It exists, but it exists in this weird limbo state. Because what's going to happen is activity 2 is going to remain as an active and valid activity. The people who are working in activity 2 are going to remain in activity 2 until they complete it. From their point of view, nothing whatsoever has happened. From your point of view, as a process manager, that means that everything that's currently running in activity 2 is going to stay in activity 2. Now, sometimes that's fine. Sometimes you want everybody to stay in activity 2, and the next time that the process runs, activity 2 will just not start. Now, the downside of that is, even if everything else is fine, I don't actually know when everybody finishes with activity 2, so I'm going to have to continuously check back because Process Director, while it will not assign anyone to activity 2 at the moment, is also not going to let me delete activity 2. This is the equivalent of being marked for deletion in a form. You know, if you delete a field from the forms template in the Online Form Designer, okay, that field no longer displays, but it still exists. You have to go into the Form Controls tab of the form definition and find that field and either remap it to a different field or delete that field. And until you delete it, the field technically still exists, even if there's not a control to fill it out to provide it with a value, and it's just blank on all of the new instances of the forms. This is kind of a similar concept. This activity has been marked for deletion, but I can't delete it. Problem is, I don't know when everybody's going to get out of activity 2. I don't know how long it's going to last. Everybody's just sort of going to finish activity 2 on whatever time frame it's set. And look, some activities could go on for months, which raises actually 2 problems. The immediate problem that we're talking about here is I don't know when I'm actually going to be able to delete activity 2. Even worse, and this is why it's such a problem from our point of view. Currently, the way we set it up now, everybody stays in activity 2. We're all giddily happily, right? Well, maybe not. Because what if activity 2 I no longer need or I no longer want? I now have the same problem. I now have to get everyone who is currently in activity 2 out of activity 2. So that means that if I have 120 instances where people are working in activity 2, I once again must go and open 120 process instances individually and cancel all 120 of those cancel activity 2 in all 120 of those processes. And only once I've done that can I come back to the definition and delete activity 2. So there's no good way of solving the I'm going to delete an activity problem. Either I'm going to throw everything into an error state and you're going to have to go in and fix it manually, or I'm going to throw nothing into an error state. Now, depending on whether you care that they stay in activity 2 or not, you're going to want a different solution for that. If you want people tossed out of activity 2, you probably do want it to go into an error state. In fact, you'd probably even be happy if I just canceled activity 2, which, by the way, is one of the ways we did it in past versions. We went from, okay, throw everything into an error state. That's inconvenient. Okay, cancel all the activities. I didn't want them canceled. Okay, now we just won't let you delete it and we won't cancel anything. But now I've got to go and cancel everything. There's no right answer from our point of view. The system can only work one way, and there are at least 3 valid ways, depending on where we are in our configuration and what we're doing. There are at least 3 valid ways that we're going to want this to work, but it can only work one of those ways. This is the way it works now. So while I have my activities, and I'll just go ahead and save this, and we're fine, and I can go into my active timelines, I suppose what I should probably do is go into my user profile and let's see, process and error. I certainly don't want to get rid of that one. So I'm in activity 2 here. Let me see, activity 2. So this is one that's in activity 2. So I'm going to go ahead and complete it. And look, it just works as normal. Look, now I'm in activity 3. Everything is fine. So something else to keep note of. Before I saved my process timeline, activity 3 was dependent on activity 2. Now, when I created the instance and the activity instance for 2 was created, I also now know that I'm going to move to activity 3 as my next activity. It was dependent. So I know that activity 3 in this instance is the dependent activity on this instance of activity 2. So this works fine. It throws me in activity 3. In fact, I got to do it again. Where am I here? Activity 2. So let me go to this one. Let me complete that. And this one goes to activity 3. Great. We're happy, happy, happy. And now we can go back into my single process active timelines here. And I'm in activity 3, 3, 1, 3, 3, 1. That's great, which means I can now go to my process. Nobody is running activity 2. And finally, I can remove the activity and I can hit OK. I can save my timeline. I don't get that little error message. The timeline has been saved. If I reopen it, I'm activity 1, activity 4, activity 3. So for all of my activities that were in activity 1, so let's go back. Oh, wrong one. Let's go back to my active timelines. So here's one in activity 1. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and I have the ability to view the timeline form. That does not view it in task context. So that is not useful for me. What I need to do is open up that particular form. So let's go back into my user profile workspace. I probably should have given these more unique names than form, process, and sub-process, because now I'm confused as to what I'm doing. No, at least on this one, I gave it sub 1 and main 1, 2, and 3. So activity 1, that's in activity 1. Let's open that. So let me complete activity 1. It went to activity 4. That's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted it to do. Activity 2 is gone. Now remember, I was already in activity 1, but as I said, in the instance, activity 2 does not yet exist. And when it no longer exists, then when I complete activity 1, I'm going to have to check and see, all right, where do I go now? Where I go now is activity 4, because that's the dependent activity on activity 1. So great. It now knows where to go. And so for people who are not yet running the activity that you deleted, I replaced it with activity 4. So now when I complete activity 1, I'm just going to go straight to activity 4. If I complete activity 4, I'm going to go straight to activity 3. And ultimately, I will complete my process, and that will all be done. Now, I think I have another one here in activity 1. I do. And we want to get out of activity 1 completely. And this one, of course, also will go to activity 4. And we'll close it without saving. At this point, we'll keep that one active. Now that I've completed a process timeline, by the way, that process timeline instance that I just completed a second ago now appears in my completed timelines. Now, completed timelines are a little bit different. Everything has already happened. And if I go into the administration timeline, everything is done. However, I can restart the timeline. So depending on how your timeline is configured, probably not a great idea to start right here in the middle, but technically I can. I can restart the timeline at any activity. So this is a completed timeline, but I can make the magic happen again. If I go into the properties, now I get way fewer things that I can do. All that replace user and reassign user and all that stuff, that's all gone. I still have the ability to remove the user, however. So I can actually remove my user record from this. So that remove user button is a troubling, or remove user link is a troublingly powerful link. So use it wisely, use it with care whenever you are removing users, because you can even go in and do this after the fact. So I would suggest that you limit who gets to be a process manager in your organization. Now, just because I removed it here doesn't mean it's like gone forever. I mean, you do have an audit log. This is not technically related to managing processes, but let's go into system settings. Let's go into troubleshooting. You've got this audit logs page. Now, most of you don't have this turned on. You really should. You should really turn on audit logging. By default, audit logging occurs, but just like all of the other audit logs, it shows up in the logs file. And so, I mean, I can go to the audit logs and I can see everything that happened here by looking at my audit logs, but it's all a text audit log. And just like all of the other logs, and audit logs get real big, real quick. This is not going to go back too far in time. On my system, it will, because like I said, I'm the only person who does anything. So everything that gets logged is me. If you have a system like we have some universities, they have 40,000 users. How long do you think this audit log goes in time, these text audit logs? Because remember, this is just text files. When they reach 2 megabytes, we demote the main text file, create a new one, and that what was originally the main text file becomes backup 1, and we go all the way to backup 12. Okay, so even with the main and 12 backup text files, all of which are 2 megabytes, if you got 40,000 users, again, we're using the size of the file to determine when to create, when to go through the whole backup chain, do our main text file and the 12 backup text files. That's not going to go back very far in time, because every time I open a page, every time I run a K-view, every time somebody goes in and changes permissions on something, every time somebody logs in, every time they log off, that's all a text entry in the text file. You got 40,000 users, and a.bkp12, which is my backup file, my 12th backup file, that might only go back, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 minutes in time. So you do have the option via the appropriate system variable or custom variable. Don't remember what the name is right off the top of my head, but there's a set of custom variables that enable you to store the audit logs in the process directory database. Audit logs get big. You can determine how far back you want to store the audit logs. If you want to go back 30 days or 2 weeks, however long you feel is long enough to investigate something that might have occurred at some point in the past. Hopefully you find out quickly, and you don't need to look back at what happened last year. However, we do have customers that don't have end dates on their logs, and they go back, and I was able, in one case, for one customer to go back and determine precisely who changed the permissions on a set of knowledge view and when and how many times they change permissions, because they have audit logs going back for a full year. So that makes things a lot easier to trace, and it's a lot easier to read the audit logs here whenever you search for stuff than it would be to just look at the text files. Now, I don't have it turned on here, but You have all of these ways that you can search, searching by object ID, grab the ID for an object. You can search for it. It's fabulous. Tells you everything that happened to the object, every time it was edited, when permissions were changed and whatever. It's useful to turn on audit logging on your system. Do, however, try to keep some sort of reasonable time limit on it, maybe 30 days. I know I just talked about somebody that's keeping a year full of logs, but look, if you've got thousands of users and you're keeping a year full of logs, that's going to be a huge, huge database table. I mean, okay, granted, it's in SQL Server. It's not that big of a deal to pull out even very large files, but it's going to be a huge database table. So you may want to think about what what's a reasonable time limit for maintaining audit logs in the database on your system. But doing it in the text files, definitely not the answer, because it doesn't go back far enough. So that's just sort of an aside, because if something wonky happens in a process, it's really useful to be able to go back and to easily find anything that happened in the log files. Because just going into the logs page and just trying to read the log files is super painful. Technically, all of the text files are comma separated text files. However, different log entries have different numbers of items in the comma separated list. So while technically I could copy and paste this into Excel and just save it as a CSV or just import it as a CSV, I'm going to have different things in different columns. Obviously, the very first will be the date. So, I mean, that'll all be the same there. And the second object will generally be the same, as will the third. But once we get beyond the IP address, all this stuff starts to get real different depending on what it is that I'm doing. So technically, I can pull this into an Excel spreadsheet as a CSV file, and I could edit it there. It's easier if you just turn on audit logging, because you can then just search for the results that you want for a particular object, and then you can just export that audit data to a CSV file as is, and then you have it in Excel, and you can do any additional data mining that you might want to do on it. All right, so with that said, we've now talked about all the normal management stuff, and including problems that you're going to cause intentionally by reconfiguring your process timelines. Great. Now let's talk about what happens when things go wrong. Well, we do provide you with a knowledge views folder. It's on the support site. It's in the download section. There's a little section on that page. It's the product, the custom tasks, the utilities, and then as you go down, it gives you links to download the knowledge views package, the custom utilities package, the custom tasks, all of which are downloadable. In the knowledge views, we give you a processes in error knowledge view. It is this knowledge view right here. It's fine as far as it goes. If we just go ahead and update and run it, it shows you the process that's in error. I have one. I intentionally created the error. We've got when it started. So it started yesterday when I was setting up for this. Who did it? Me. Where the current error we're in is an activity called error activity. So it looks like everything is working exactly the way I expected. Putting activity into an error state because too many results met condition and no default setting. So that tells me I have a misconfiguration. It's almost always a misconfiguration. Not always, but almost always. We'll address that in a second. And then it shows me the instance ID. That's okay as far as it goes, except what I'd like to do is to copy that instance ID, and I can't. So that makes it a little less useful. Although I can go over here into the content list if I'm looking for something and type in 82AD. which are the last four items in the instance, and it's not going to show up because it is an instance. Okay. I'm not super happy with that. I can actually open it directly from here. So that's good, I suppose. But where is it? Where is this process? So the processes in error is fine. Ignore the fact that I hate that icon because it's one of the old bitmap icons. I've customized mine just a little bit because what I really want to know is where this darn thing is. And so I have added the path so that I can say it's in training webinar, managing processes, folder 1, period, process in error, processes in error. Okay, now I know where to find it. 1 processes in error. There we go. That is my process timeline definition that is in error. And so now I can go find the active timelines and I can make the fix. Couple of things to note. I have walked you through the process of creating this process timeline before, this knowledge view before, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on it, except to say that in the choose system variable dialog box, you want to use the process. Now, you don't have to. I don't use workflows on my system. I'm going to go on a rant about this in a second, but you should be using workflows on your system. So technically, I can use timeline system variables, and I can use timeline initiator instead of process initiator. Now, there's a reason that we use the process rather than the timeline system variables. So if we go here, process, there we go. Well, having trouble with mouse control. Process initiator. That could be timeline initiator. It could be timeline instance name. It doesn't necessarily have to be the process. The reason that we are using the process system variables is because it will grab both process timelines and workflows and concatenate them all into one big happy family, because a process refers to any of the process models, any of the 2 process models, process timeline or workflow, that exist in Process Director. I'm begging you with tears in my eyes to stop using workflows if you're using them. And if you're not using them, don't start. We can't actually get rid of them. We have a lot of legacy customers. We have customers that have been Process Director customers since before I started working at this company in 2014. So I've been here for 11 years. There are customers here that predate me, and they still use workflows. In fact, you may remember a couple of months ago, we made an announcement on the support site that we were just going to drop all support for workflows. And by the way, we're not going to be particularly helpful if you have workflow questions. I got to be honest with you. Nobody at BP Logix has used workflows for like a decade. Workflows were deprecated before I got here. We stopped even updating workflows at all in version 4.5. Yet when we said, hey, we're going to get rid of workflows, a couple of customers, both of which have been here been a customer longer than I've been at BP Logix, said, we're going to keep using workflows. We've always used workflows. We don't like process timelines, and we don't understand them, and we don't care that you can do more with them. And if you remove workflows from the product, we're gone. All right. So we're not going to remove workflows from the product. What we are going to do is we're going to remove it from the create new menu, and you're only going to be able to see it if you set a custom variable to open it up. So for most of you, we don't need to use the process custom variables. You can use the timeline custom variables and everything will be fine, because you shouldn't be on workflows at all. We can't get rid of them, but we are, it's like with the word form builder. At some point, we're just not going to be helpful with the word form builder anymore. And if you come up and say, well, I have a word form builder form, I'd like to edit it to do this or that. Our response, honestly, is going to be, okay, well, good luck with that. We wish you the best. Because nobody here has, I think Francis Moritz and I are the only two people at BP Logix now who remember and used the word form designer. So also, plus the fact that it literally doesn't work in Microsoft Office anymore. And ActiveX has reached end of life, as has Internet Explorer. So workflows are the same kind of thing. So there's my rant. Told you I was going to rant. I have now ranted. Workflow rant over. You need a process in error, custom task. Now, we give you one. It's perfectly fine. Like I said, I've changed it to add in the path. That's really my big argument with that. Well, also, I changed the icon because I hate the old bitmap icons from the early aughts, from like 99 to 09. That said, you can just download it, but you can also create it. It's not that hard to create. Now, when you have a process in error and you run your little process in error knowledge view, you do have to fix them. And so we'll now open this. Now it tells me what the error message is. We're putting the activity into an error state because too many results met condition and no default setting. This is probably the most common error that you're going to see. Actually, there are probably two common errors that you're going to see, although I think they're going to have the same error message. That error message is okay. Putting activity into an error state because too many results met condition and no default setting. So something is happening that wants to complete my activity, but I don't have a default result set. And so that's a useful error message. That is, in fact, exactly what is happening with my error activity. That's why it's in an error state. But I can invoke that in a couple of different ways. I'll show you. So let's open up here our administration timeline tab. And okay, one or more activities are in an error state. Make that obvious. And also let's make the error activity, back. I guess it's not really backlit, but let's give it a red background and make it scream, this is bad. Bad things are happening in this activity. This activity is in an error state that repeats, and it shows me that it's in an error state with that same error message. So how do I fix this error? Well, for me, it's easy because I intentionally created the error, so I know exactly how it was created. Please note, if I right-click and go to Properties, that error message doesn't show up here. We are going to fix that so that we can actually see the error message in case the tooltip is extended off the edge of the screen. That shouldn't happen anymore either, but it will now extend off the bottom of the screen. So something is going to be extending off the bottom of the screen. Okay, so how am I going to fix that? Well, probably a two-stage process. This error is a result of a misconfiguration. Now, what I've done in the error activity is I've set a completed when, and I want this activity to be complete when A equals A. So this activity wants to complete the second it starts, right? Because A always equals A. Great, and process director would love to complete it, except I got two results, approve and deny, and neither one of them is set as the default result. Completing an activity, a user activity, requires two things. First, it requires that I have some condition that ends it. And second, I need a result for a user activity. What is the result of this user's activity? All the other activity types have their own built-in results, and they don't care about what users do or don't do. The user activity is a different sort of bear, and it needs an activity result because most of the time you have conditions in other activities or conditions on the form or looping conditions or whatever that are trying to evaluate the results of the activity. As we've talked about before, a user activity actually consists of two parts. There is the activity itself, which configures how the user task is going to be assigned, to whom it is going to be assigned, and it matches that user task with the user activity. The user, and we use these terms often. I catch myself doing it. I use the terms user task and user activity interchangeably as if they were the same thing. They are not. The activity cannot end. When a user activity starts, it immediately invokes a user task. The task has to be completed by the user with a result. That's a little misleading. It doesn't necessarily have to be completed by the user, but it does need to be completed with a result, whether the user manually selects that result or whether I specify that result via either a result condition or by setting it as the default result. I'm having a lot of trouble highlighting stuff. I may need to clean out my trackball. In any event, it is the result that ends the user task. It is the end of the user task that completes the activity. If on the completed when tab, I say, okay, I want you to complete the activity, I can't complete the activity until the task is completed as well. So I can't complete the task until there's a result for the task. So I'm actually going through quite a chain of logic in my timeline instance whenever I'm running a user task as to what gets closed when. Now I can fix this really easily because I have a valid condition to end the activity, but what I don't have is a default result. So I can just simply set the default result as approve, and we'll go ahead and close, and we will save our process timeline. And now I can go back to my active timeline. That is an error. And I can now clear the error by restarting this activity. And by the way, this is a little irksome too. That error message isn't going to go away until I refresh my screen. Now, when I refresh my screen, not only does my error message go away, but also note I'm no longer in error activity because that activity ended correctly. The complete condition was met. The task ended. I ended it with a complete condition met. And now I am running in activity 3, and we are happy as a clam. Now, let's do something a little weirder because this is something that is also likely to happen that is going to produce a very similar error. We are going to take this process in error and you know what? Let me export it and re-import it real quick. What time is it, by the way? Oh, it's 11:38. I don't think we're going to get to the synchronous and asynchronous processes deeply at all, but that's fine. I have a whole webinar about that, so there's no reason to cover that ground in any detail. What am I trying to do here? What I'm trying to do is export that folder save it, and that should have saved. Let's go back to managing processes, and I don't want to import that here. Um, Let me create a new, I don't want to overwrite that first one there. So I want to make a second one. So actually, I can just do it inside the folder. Um, Import objects, and we'll grab processes and error 1.pdz. We'll open that, and that should import everything. So here is something that is likely to happen. I'm going to rename this real quick. We'll call it 1A. Another process and error, because this is likely to occur inadvertently. So let's go to this form, and we're going to need to make a quick change to it. So it has this text box, which again, not sure why I put it on there, but I did. Now we got to live with it. But what we're going to do is we're going to drop in a user picker. User picker 3. Great. That's all I care to do. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign my error activity to whoever is in user picker 2. So that's the change I'm going to make to my form. So now I'm going to go into my process and error timeline. I'm going to go to error activity. And we're going to do a couple of things here. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and keep these. I am going to go ahead and remove this default result though. Close that and update. So once again, I have no default result in error activity 2. So approve or deny. I am going to remove my completed when condition. So let's just get rid of that. So we're going back to more of a normal activity. Oh, and first user complete activity. Okay, so when the first user is done, the activity is going to complete. And we need to go to the participants tab because we're going to change this from timeline initiator to from form field. And we are going to grab user picker 3 as our form field to run through here. Okay, great. So we're assigning a user via form field. Seems cool so far. We're going to say, okay, great. And now we are going to run the form. And this might happen. Now, what I should do is make this user picker a required field so that I can't submit the form unless I select a user. Sadly, I have neglected to do so. An even worse case is I have selected the user and that user is no longer with us and I have disabled that user's account. So fine, we will complete our activity. We've completed activity 1. We're running. Let's take a look at our processes and error. And we'll run mine, but it doesn't really matter which one we run. Okay. Putting activity into an error state because too many results met condition and no default setting. What does that mean? What met condition? What no default setting? This is kind of a misleading error message. Now, if we go back into our errors and we go into another process and error, my fundamental problem is that I do not have a user assigned to my error activity. Did I do the right thing? I have no active or completed timelines. Am I invoking the right one? Do I have an active timeline here? Okay. I do have an error activity, so I should have changed the timeline that I was calling. So it's all higgledy-piggledy now, but fine. Here we go. I'm now running error activity. Notice in the error activity pop-up here, the tooltip, there's no routing slip. In fact, if I go back over here, there's no activity, there's no error activity showing up here in the routing slip here. What's happened? Well, I didn't assign a user. Because I didn't assign a user and there is no default result, the process timeline does not know what to do with this activity. Is this a misconfiguration? Technically, no, because I do have a user assignment, but for whatever reason, the user picker is now not returning the right user. Okay, that's not great, but not horrifying, except I did not set a default result. It's probably wise to set a default result when you can. But that's also tricky too, because depending on what you're doing, in some situations, you may want X to be the default result. In other situations, you may want Y to be the default result. But you can't do that. You have to pick one and only one result as the default result. That is our basically final fallback result that we are going to apply whenever, like in this case, we just don't have a user assigned. Interestingly enough, I can fix this error. Well, there's a couple of ways I can fix this error. The most obvious way is to go into properties and to assign a user to this activity. Let's assign Diana. Let's add the user. Okay, great. Diana is now the user for that activity. We can close that. Well, we didn't want to close that, but now we have the error activity. It's running. Let's go back over here. Are we in a default state or an error state? No, we are not. Error activity is running fine. Diana can come in. She can complete this activity, and we are all going to be happy campers because Diana was assigned. Interestingly enough, I've canceled this timeline, so we're done with it. Interestingly enough, if I go into the processes in error, and I think I can do this by just getting rid of one result. So let me remove that result. And let me close it. I think this will actually work. I actually tested it by removing all the results, but we'll just keep one result. So we'll go to our form here. And wait a second, I removed it here, right? This is the one I'm using, approve result. So let's go to the form. Let me be sure that I am invoking the right process timeline. I don't want it to call this one down here. So options, automatically start. Let me rename this. I want to be able to tell who is what. So we'll call this process in error 2. Just to give ourselves a name that we can use properly. Okay, now we'll go to our form, and it is going to call process in errors 2. Okay, great. Then I think we're fine. So we'll invoke this form. We'll run it. Once again, I am going to, oh, you know what I did? I started the wrong form. I must have edited the wrong everything. Well, that's exactly what I didn't want to do. But now that I've done it in the wrong place, yeah, I did it in the wrong place. So I guess this is the one I have to fix, which means I'm going to have to reconfigure all of this all over again next time I run it. Yeah, there we go. Let's remove that result. Fine. Close, save, and we're going to do this one more time. Run it. I'm not going to apply a user, and I'm going to complete activity 1. And wait a second. What happened? Let's go back to my process in error. I'm sorry. Let's go back to my active timelines. I'm in activity 3 now. Error activity just completed. What happened? Here's what happened. Because no user was assigned to that activity, and that activity only had one result, which is, approve, we just skipped that activity. I'm only going to see that error pop up if I have multiple results for my process and error activity. Because I, in fact, do not have multiple results, I only have approve, then that's automatically the default result. I have no conflict in being able to shut down the activity. In fact, the task was never assigned to anybody. It just ends as not needed because no one is assigned a task. And when the task ends, the timeline activity just automatically ends. Nothing happened. It skipped. This seems like an inconsistent behavior to me. If I have no user assigned, you would think that what I'd want to do is raise an error on that activity and say no user is assigned. And in fact, if I have multiple results, that is what is going to happen. It is going to raise an error if I don't have a default result set. Again, this is one of those things where we're in a tough position as the people who determine how the product is going to work. If I don't assign a user, do I in fact want to skip the activity, or do I want to raise an error? Again, this worked differently in the past. We used to just raise an error. Hey, no user assigned here. And some customers said, but maybe I don't want to assign a user there. If there's no user, I just, want to keep moving on through the timeline. I shouldn't have to configure some sort of weird condition that's like a needed when condition that says only run this activity if a user has been assigned, because that would be a super hard condition to create. I'm not entirely sure how I would do that. And I might want to do this in a lot of multiple places. So the consensus has been that if you're going to have multiple results, but you don't know if a user is going to be assigned, set the default. That way I don't have to worry about that process and error, and it will just set the appropriate default and we'll skip right past that activity like nothing ever happened. So if I were to add a new result here, then I would want to go and be sure that I had a default result, whatever my 2 or 3 activity results were, so that when I run the form, and if I don't, supply a user, then let's go back to my active timelines. Nope, that active timelines. And let's pop this open. I'm in activity 1, so I do want to complete that activity. Okay, fine. Now we'll go back here and refresh it. Well, I'm in activity 3. So again, I skipped activity 2. Basically, it just never occurred. And if I look here, we see error activity. And if we actually go and get it's a little tiny thing. If I can get my mouse over it, it will show me that this activity status is complete. The result was approved because I had multiple results, but I set one as the default, and it just skipped right past activity 1. It ended automatically because nobody was assigned to it, and it went straight into activity 3. It seems that the consensus is that this is the best way to have a process timeline instance work when there are no users assigned. Those are the 2 primary types of errors. As you can see, they're actually fairly different, although they both result from not having a default activity set. And I get the same error message, but the causes of the 2 errors are quite different. So the activity and error, it's good to have that knowledge view. and it's good to know how to troubleshoot these activities. It's best to avoid them altogether by ensuring A, you've always got a user assigned to a user activity, and B, if you have multiple results, which most of the time you do, that you set a default result. There's even a real tricky way of doing it. You can set a default result. You can set a third result as the default result and hide that result. So it never shows up on a form. Nobody ever sees it. But if you have a completion condition, or if a user is not assigned, let's say the user got removed from the system and then the activity ran and there was nobody to assign the activity to, you have a default result, and you could restart the loop based on that default result. Whatever you needed to do, and you would never have to show it on a form, because whenever you are inside any process activity and you're looking at an activity result, you do have a condition to show the result button. I mean, technically, you could never show the result, show the result button when A equals 1, which will never happen, and then just set it as the default result. Oh, also, don't set 2 default results. Bad things will happen just as if you had only set 1 default result. So there's some tricks that you can pull so that you don't get these errors cropping up. And if you are not sure what if your 2 results are approve and deny, and you're not sure what should be the default, well, neither one of them have to be. You can just create a third result that never gets displayed, but is the default result. And you can call it, no user assigned, or, automated, automatically complete, or whatever you want to call it, you can call it. And who knows, perhaps you'll even spell it correctly when you call it what you call it. But I think with all of that done, that completes our 2-hour inquiry into managing processes and managing process instances, and how you can play around with them, and how you can also correct some errors, at least the most common errors. That's all I have for you this week. I will look forward to speaking with you again next week. Have a great end of your week. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. So long.